Welcome, global friends. How is everybody? Welcome to the Leaders Who Care video conversation series. It's becoming too long a title these days, but super happy to see you here. I was saying before this that I've actually physically only been in the room with one of you, and maybe we'll reveal that answer like a contest at the end of the video or something. But it's great to have you here. This is the Future of Work panel. We're talking about the future, which is possibly becoming the present right now. And so I think, as usual, the best place to start would be if you could each briefly introduce yourself, like your name, a little bit about yourself, something no one else knows that you want to tell the world, something like that would be really catchy. And then we'll all chat. So, and tell where you are now and where you're from originally. So let's start with Padma.
Hi, Mark. Hello, everyone. Why did I know that you're going to put me on the spot by starting first? So I'm Padma. I am the head of HR for Takeda, based out of Tokyo. But now I'm in New Jersey, at our home in New Jersey, and something that others don't know. Okay, this picture at the back is Polar Sun. It's our first dog, Polo, our son. So I keep it very close to my desk.
Polo, nice. Well, welcome you and Polo. And let's go to Emily.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Emily Sidney-Smith, the CEO of the FoW Works. So we're working with large companies around the world to help them innovate. And the thing about me is last year I was taking on average a long haul flight a week, which was pretty full on. And actually the silver lining of this year has been that I've moved from New York back to Sydney, and actually in the same apartment building as my parents, and just having dinner with them every night is such a blessing. So that's my thing.
Super cool. And you talked about you regaining, what is it, you're regaining your accent, or people are having a trouble time understanding you were saying?
G'day, mate. Yeah, it's coming back.
What do you mean, eh? So speaking of what do you mean, I'll leave you for last, Audie, but new friend, David, introduce yourself.
Hi, Mark. So if you want to talk about an accent, please be welcome. Yeah. So my name is David Benatar. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer for the Warehouse Group, which is New Zealand's largest retail group. We own more than 12% of retail in the country. We are the equivalent of Walmart, to make it short. And okay, a bit of myself. Before moving to New Zealand, I spent 20 years in the US, in New York. And yeah, I did a bunch of work on sustainability, digital innovation, and I was in the luxury industry, the arts, and I'm originally from France. No kidding, from the southwest of France, a really lovely little town by the Pyrenees Mountains. My family lives in Israel and France, and is from North Africa. So we are a very rich mix of different cultures, all combined into one big mesh. So that's for me.
I love it. So, vous parlez le bon français ou le français québécois? Comme...
Ah, le français québécois. Non, non, Chris.
Okay.
Oh mon Dieu. Oh mon Dieu.
Is it at mit de Brit?
You know, I'll tell you a very quick story before we go. The first time I came to New Zealand to speak about culture and diversity right there, I was speaking with the flight attendant, and she says during the flight, she goes, you're going to have to be careful about the exit. And I look at the door behind me and I see the sign exit, and we are 12,000 feet high. And I say, why is she talking about the exit right here? And in fact, she was talking about the accents. So now we can quickly realize how this misunderstanding can open up to some very different consequences.
Well, I do remember, I hate to get on stories because we'll never get to the subject, but I remember in Quebec, there were some Americans, they saw the sign en solde, and they kept thinking everything was sold out, but it was actually just for sale, basically a clearance type of thing. So maintenant, bienvenue mon ami Henri, what's your story?
Oh, I speak a proper French because my father's from France, and I never got understood in Montreal. So they always thought I was a tourist, which is a bit of an issue. And I always told them I always made up things I was from Belgium or Switzerland to stir the pot a little bit. So what's my story? I married a Kiwi in Toronto, and she exported me to New Zealand 16 and a half years ago. Didn't know any better. There were just two rocks at the bottom of the world. Only thing I knew about this region was Sydney from the Olympics. So bit of a culture shock. My friends used to ring me up and make sheep sounds on the phone and hang up. I thought that wasn't very nice. But I got the last laugh. We have the best lifestyle. We're reasonably COVID-free for now. And I got to meet David when he actually arrived 3 years ago now, David? Is that right? 4 years ago. God, time flies. And it's his birthday in a couple of weeks, by the way. I only know that because we're celebrating, right? But on a serious note, I established a company called Board Dynamics 11 years ago plus, and we're well known in New Zealand as trusted advisors to all types of boards, from listed companies to crown entities to private companies. And we have fun. I know I have a lot of fun. I travel quite a bit, similar to you. Emily, I was on a plane often. I was probably in Europe 3 times a year, in North America 4, and so on and so forth. In Australia a lot, especially Sydney and Melbourne. And we have fun. And I've known Mark for a while. He reached out to me because we both went to Mill University a number of years apart, but I won't say how many because Mark's still younger than me, right, Mark?
No, of course, whatever you say. No one's bored around Henri.
I knew you were going to say that. And one piece of trivia most people don't know is I wrote a TV pilot with a friend, and we thought we were going to get signed, but there was a bit of a GFC by Sony Pictures, and that never happened. So in the Library of Congress, there's a TV pilot sitting there hoping it'll get picked up one day.
That's pretty cool. You know, there's one person who hasn't said something we don't know about her.
Oh, yes.
And that's Emily.
Oh, well, I thought that, flying around the world like a crazy thing was it. And having dinner with my parents every night is kind of an unusual thing. Does that not do?
No, that'll work. That'll work, yeah. So super cool. We need you a little bit lighter there, David, just to let you know. If you move a little bit to your left, you'll probably be lighter. Because you're still a little bit darker. So we can actually see you. That's pretty good. That'll work. So before looking at the actual future of work, let's go back in time, back to the future a little bit. And this could be fun, actually. If you could each share maybe like what your first 1 or 2 jobs, and not one when you were like 12, unless you started a startup that made you $1 million or something. But just share with us a little, what your first 1 or 2 jobs look like. I think it'd be an interesting way to start. So we'll go to Emily first.
So a first job was that I actually joined a conference company, and at the time I was like, I should have been joining a big investment bank or something. And in fact, it was a much better job in my view, because I was expected to be actually planning out conferences and working out what the hot topics for the top people in the industry would be in 9 months' time. So a lot of sort of predictive stuff, and then having to call up the top CEOs in the entire industry and convince them to come along for free and do something. And so at the, age of 21 or whatever it was just a fantastic way to start the career and see the big picture and know how to network.
That is pretty cool. That's a great way to start. What about you, Padma?
Well, my first role was not very far from the profession that I have. I actually started with compensation and benefits analysis, but the interesting dynamic was I was thrown into the world of unions around the world. So 25 unions in the US, various works councils in Europe, and politically backed unions in Asia, to say the least, but definitely learned a lot of things, including some very, very colorful curse words that people would use on the other side. And I didn't even know words like that existed.
Kind of reminds me of when the guys from Wales came over to Deloitte on exchanges and whatnot. And this guy, first of all, he says, "Hey, boyo, get me this. And I said, what are you talking about? No, he's calling me Boyo from, I guess, Scotland or whatever. And he says, I need a rubber and I need a, can you give me a faggot? I mean, what are you talking about, dude? I was young until I didn't know what he was talking about. So, hey, David, what
Yeah.
did your job look like?
Oh my God, my first job was the best thing ever. I reference that job all the time. You know, when you create stories in your life and you go back to the stories, that job was for Aveda, which was this sweetheart of beauty, natural beauty pioneer, which was then acquired by Estée Lauder, became part of the Estée Lauder portfolio. But Aveda was all based on environmental protection and sustainability and biodiversity. So we had the Uruku lipstick that was made by sourcing pigments from the Yawanawa tribe in the Amazonia. And so the stories we had were amazing and the culture was incredible and everybody was so passionate, and I really saw what a very strong culture and values can create. And I never forget that. It was really, it was my first job, guys. So, I was naive. I thought every company was like that. And oh boy, was I wrong. No, in fact, I was really blessed to be part of an organization that had sort of really profound and sort of bigger cause, bigger purpose. And that really defined everything for me. Well, in addition to the pleasure of selling lipsticks and makeup and hair care to women all around the world, that was also a pleasure. But learning the ropes is, I remember that forever. So yeah, Aveda.
Is that one of those things? It's a tough job, but somebody has to do it.
That's right.
Got it. Adi?
Last but not least, right? I'm going to actually go thinking about a job when I was in high school and university part-time. And it was a shopping center in Montreal, and Mark might know it, called Rockland. And it was near where I lived. And I was interviewed to work in a computer retail store. Back then it was computers and calculators and watches and the like. And they said, well, we'll trial you for 3 hours and we'll see how it goes. So I said, trial? Okay, I hope I get the job. Cut long story short, I got the job because I sold a lot of things in the store that evening. Maybe it was luck, but I did find stuff off the shelves, dusted them off, and talked about how these speakers or headphones are the best in the world, and had no idea what I was doing. But it taught me 3 key lessons. One is use what you have. So I like chatting to people, so I engage them. Second, don't make things up because they'll come back and return it. So it's very important to be honest. And third, sell things that people actually need because they'll come back and repeat customer. And the punchline to that little story is one of my first customers is a very famous singer who's in Las Vegas who lost her husband a few years ago. And that's Celine Dion.
Oh,
and
man, yeah.
A funny story to add to this, there's a famous sort of casual restaurant called Schwartz's Delicatessen in Montreal, famous for pastrami and the like, and the Rolling Stones on tour get it delivered when they're in North America. And I sat at the counter many years ago, and there's an older guy next to me chatting away, and I'm chatting to one of the guys who's serving, and I hadn't seen him in years, and I was with an old friend from the city, and he goes, do you want to meet the new owner? I said, what do you mean new owner? When did you sell this? Oh, just recently. And it was Celine Dion's husband who had bought that deli, and I met him. And I told him a story about selling things to his wife at the time, wasn't married to him. There's my little story, how things all go in a bit of a loop.
That's so funny because last summer I was in Montreal at Schwartz's at the counter, and we were sitting beside one of the owners of Schwartz's, around talking about Celine Dion and all that stuff. So small world. So
Village, isn't it?
This wasn't my first job, and I said we shouldn't do this, but it reminded me when I was.
Oh, so Mark, tell us about your first job, Mark.
Oh, good question. It's not my first job, but I got to say, I don't know, you just guys reminded me. I sold TV guides when I was a kid, bringing them all over the place. And one lady would give me a tip that was double the cost of the TV guide every week. And she I don't remember the exact words, but she said, she said, thanks for your great service, or something like that, and use it wisely. And she really made an impact on me. We talk about influencers. She made an impact on me that just because when because she cared and she thanked me for service, so that made me think, oh, service is important. And I should use my money wisely. Have I always done that? No, but it was good advice. So, but my first job was actually, I was hitchhiking and I was picked up by a partner of a CPA firm and he hired me. And that's when I first realized, even though I was good and got my CPA, I really did not like accounting at all. And so, but it was a good way. It was a good way to start. So that's pretty cool. And it's also cool to realize how much we've gone through in our lives and how much we're going through now with respect to life and work and everything. And so now the question is, what did you see the future looking like then during that first job? And let's go to Henri first this time.
Oh, thank you for that. I thought the future of work was internationalism. I wanted to get out of Montreal as quickly as possible. And there's nothing wrong with the city. It's a beautiful city, cosmopolitan, but it's going through a lot of challenges politically, French, English, as well as it felt too small for me. And I just wanted to see the world. So I thought the future of work was getting as much experience offshore anywhere where I felt comfortable and then coming back possibly. So there I was, after spending a little bit too much time studying and picking up a bunch of pieces of paper, I found myself in London for almost a decade. And in London, I saw the future of work was not being an employee for me. So that kind of led to where I am today, but it took reasonable courage and being bold to do it. And as David's known me for a while here, it creates a great opportunity to sort of feel free, but also has future-proofed myself, knocking on wood, as much as possible for the remainder of the time I feel like working. And I'll always work, but it might be something else one day.
Always just different chapters, not retirement, just different chapters. So, hey, Padma, what did you think the future looked for you like back then?
So I'm going to steal a little bit of what Ari was talking about. I think the global aspect was pretty important, even though I had entered into a very global footprint. Actually being there and doing it hands-on was very different than sitting in the back, right, and providing information. So I did see that. But I also started seeing the shift, movement from focus on customers and shareholders to more in terms of differentiation, and eventually to the focus on people as the key differentiator, so which made me come back into HR, right? From running a P&L role, Mark, as you know, coming back because it truly was a huge circle and it was something that I saw coming through later in life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. David? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. The future of work was really shaped by my own experiences. So I was a young French business school graduate going to work in New York. So that was really international, right? It was multicultural. Sorry, it was diverse. It was exciting. It was something where to be really engaged and customer facing. I think the customer experience was really important to me because I could see that everything was happening on the retail floor. And so there was something about that interaction that I was really cherishing and valuing, and the interaction within a multicultural context was really interesting. Once I moved forward a few years later, I really saw digital and online as being the new platform for interaction. So I remember writing an article in my school magazine in 1995 about the internet. And then in 1999, 2000, I became a partner in the digital media. So I saw this idea of going digital as something really incredible that we could all participate in. And I loved it. I thought there was something there. If you wanted to be multicultural and international, what was better than a place with no borders, which was the digital world, right? So these were all the dimensions that I saw as the future of work. And yeah, God knows that they really realized themselves in some funny ways, right?
It's funny. I remember some clients telling us, I was in the search business by then, that I don't know what this website internet thing is, but we're doing fine. We don't need that type of thing. Yeah. And that's what they told me. So crazy. Miss Emily?
So I had two amazing mentors during that first job, and they taught me amazing things. So the first one was the Honourable Jack Beale, and he had been the first Environment Minister in Australia and put together one of the biggest resources energy projects in Australia. And he said, you know, I realised that I've actually changed the world for Australia, and I actually think that you're going to be able to do the same, Emily. And what I realised is that most people are never told that kind of thing. And it really changes you to be allowed to do something big. And then the other one, Barry Lay, really showed me how to do it in a specific way. And so we were, you know, in the middle of the deregulation of the electricity industries in Australia and New Zealand. And I put together this conference program, and I thought, I'm just going to bring someone along who really thinks differently and is going to be very incendiary and really shake things up and say, okay, we can't be this usual monopolistic kind of thing, just as all these companies were being split into competing groups. And he spoke first and he said, the world is changing and it's going to be all these different things. And it felt almost flat. I was like, oh, what have I done? And then all the CEOs got up and talked about how, you know, the status quo was really the best. And Barry and I went out to dinner that particular evening. We were in Hobart, which is not that big. And suddenly all these other people from the conference were there. And they started coming over to Barry and saying, and, you know, these were slightly more junior people, I think we're not going to have a job if we don't listen to you, right? And anyway, people joined us. The restaurant stayed open for us until 4 a.m. These people were ringing their friends and saying, don't even get out of your pajamas. Please just come. You need to listen to this. And by the time we got to the second day of the conference, there was this absolute groundswell. And in fact, because of that presentation, those companies actually became some of the most innovative actually in the world, and then went and started acquiring companies all over the world and being really innovative. So I've seen that that little seed that you can plant can have just an enormous effect.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Yeah, be at the right place, right time. Here comes the future. That's pretty cool. So with that said, let's speed up to not that long ago, even though January this year seems a long time ago. That was my last trip, coming back from Davos to New York, and that was it. I haven't traveled since on that. But what did you think the future looked like in January? If you can really remember, like for real, what did you think the future looked like in January? And why don't we start with David?
Thanks, Mark, to throw me the hook here. So in January, I was coming back from the climate summit in Madrid, COP25, where heads of states and business community and the civil society came together to discuss our progress against the Paris Accord. And so in January, I was very much dealing with how do I then bring my organization into continuing the journey on sustainability leadership and climate action. And at that time, my focus was really how do I bring the entire 12,000 team members in connecting with that bigger purpose. So if you move forward, and I know you're going to ask us, what do you think about the future of work in November of this year? But if you move forward to today, COVID-19.
I want you to move forward to today yet. I want you to tell me what you thought it was going to be then. But
if you move to post-COVID-19, what you see is that actually it has just accelerated the focus on sustainability. So, you know, we'll talk about that later, but that's where I was dealing with being back here. But I was also being back from a trip in Europe to visit some of the leading companies on their own transformation and the transformation of their culture. And the one topic that we discussed a lot is how do we work into an agile world? And to me, the two dimensions of being a purpose-led organization focusing on sustainability and being an agile organization that has the capacity to adapt fast, quickly, immediately to the needs of society, we're sort of creating that new platform. And so, yeah, I guess I now remember it as it was yesterday.
Yeah, super, super interesting. Emily, I know you work a lot in scenarios, so you're probably thinking about a lot of scenarios, but in January, they were different, right?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, well, we had tripled revenue last year and we were coming into a huge year. And so we were very excited, but we were also really excited that we had seen such changes in our clients where we had actually managed to see genuine culture change and skill set change and, you know, putting together initiatives that were going to be hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gains per initiative. And actually those have been seen through. Those got accelerated during COVID, which was really great to see that the company said, okay, these are the futures of our company. But we're already seeing a sort of breakdown in what people were thinking about the world. You know, I think that Yuval Noah Harari talked about the fact that society is based on these shared myths. Well, I think a lot of those myths were breaking down. We were seeing that the economics that we had based our worlds on were not actually showing to be true in real life. You know, all of these things about, you know, is it going to be reshoring? There was so much friction underlying things. And so as we came into the COVID time, we've always been saying, you know, that there's this huge crisis, but there's this underlying trend going on that actually we're going to come into a fairly different world order, a fairly different economic nature, and we need to be watching for all of those things as well.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. Come back to that also. I guess it's Henri, right?
I know. And let me have a think of what I could say. No, on a serious note, January was interesting because Mark and I were trying to actually meet in person. And he was saying, can I meet him in Davos? And I'm saying, let me think about this. LA, it's warm. Davos is cold. That was a pretty quick answer. But I said, let's try again next year. So this January. So let's forget about that, obviously, 2021. It was the beginning of something, feeling something in the air, but unsure what it was. It was a week actually looking at global studies on behalf of the University of Auckland. I sit on one of their councils, and we started discussing the future of the world if this pandemic actually got worse, because I lived in Toronto during SARS, and SARS was very well contained, even though in Toronto we were concerned. And my eldest son was born during SARS, and he's fine. He turns 18 in January. But on a serious note, I did start discussing a little bit about the future of work, and it wasn't as focused as this conversation, but it was about, okay, we're here together, but can we maybe not always have to fly in and fly out for these meetings? And should we think about using technology? And that was respect to sustainability and the carbon footprint. I think we had more fun in the evening going out for dinner to various places, and actually during the day it could have been done via Zoom or similar technology.
Yeah, no kidding. That would have been fun in Davos, but maybe, I know they've kind of postponed it to the summer, but I'm not sure that's even going to happen in 2021. A lot of other things. A couple of you have heard me say this before, because we talk about influencers, and my grandparents were big influencers of me, and they would always say, in that Kiev accent that a couple of you have kind of heard, is as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing, is what they would say. And so here we are, we're talking about the future of work, but there's now COVID hit big time. US, it's already in the hundreds of thousands per day cases now going on. Technology still keeps zooming like crazy. Racial justice, social justice. Tipping point had to come. Mother Nature decided this is as good a time as any. Why not do it now? And a bunch of other stuff going on. So there's kind of like, I'm sure you guys felt it, like you chat about it. There's an awakening of what's really important to us as humans out there and for our planet. And what I'd like to ask you now is, with respect to what the future of work now looks like, is it present already here? Is part of it present? What does it look like, you know, from this standpoint? And think about it at the same time where we started, of how much we've all lived through in our lives, business-wise and just life-wise. How many things have changed in the last 50 years compared to the last 2,000 is quite incredible if you really look back. So that's why it's interesting to take that journey. But how about who wants to start this one? I'll give you guys, you know, the option, little freedom, democracy here in a different way. Anybody, or should I pick?
I'll go. Oh no, Emily, you go. You got it.
Go for it.
So You know, I think we have talked a lot about purpose, and I think in many ways in the past people have been trained or chosen because they can do the Hunger Games kind of leadership and, you know, deal with all those politics. And it comes back to what I said at first. If you're not telling people that you're allowed to go and change things and become better, and if you're saying to companies or people within companies, hey, a 10% improvement would be fantastic, and yet there are these companies out there that are consistently doing things that are tenfold better, how are you meant to compete? And so I think that when you actually enable people by saying, you know, the first thing that we do with teams is say, how do you want to improve the lives of millions or billions of people? And that will give you a problem that you want to be solving that's huge enough to actually have a big market. And there's usually a very profitable way to do that. And so then people are incredibly inspired. They feel like it's the best thing that they've ever done in their careers. And they can actually have the guts to see it through because they're truly engaged in it. And so we see time and time again that focus on purpose really works, rather than just setting people up to do the Hunger Games version.
So how do you see that happening? For example, we got trusting people, I think is critical. It's actually, in some ways, takes the burden off of the leader to trust their people. Now they're remote. How do you trust them remotely?
Well, I think that there are a couple of aspects to that. I mean, first of all, we lost a lot of the play and creativity out of things when we went remote in a lot of companies. And so bringing that back also gives you a sense of whether people are engaged or not. And so, you know, we love working with objectives and key results where every employee is actually saying, this is what I want to be delivering to the company, you know, at whatever cadence of time. And when that happens, people can measure themselves against it, and then the leaders can see whether they've done that too. But I think that this is a time when people have this mass level of low-level PTSD, and you know, people are finding it very hard to get to that higher level thinking. And so if you can actually bring that purpose-driven aspect back into work, then you get that engagement and that morale that then gives the productivity.
Yeah, purpose is critical. I see it. We talked about chapters or whatnot before. People that retire, if you don't have purpose, it's not a good scene, basically. And we all need it. We all feel it. Padma, what about you with respect to everything going on? What does the future look like? Future of work look like?
So the way I've thought about this, right? So during COVID is actually talking about what is the immediate reset, because you really need to reset the organization immediately to meet all your stakeholders, and that's reaction. And for me, the current times, I call it as journeying times. So post-COVID, maybe being in pharma, maybe being closer to these things, truly the lens that I have is when you have some sort of a treatment, whether it's a vaccine, a plasma, because that's what's going to determine what is going to be allowed in the sense of human interaction. But I do agree with Emily, what she was talking about, right? So there were a lot of changes happening. When I look at the breadth of risks and opportunities companies had was much, much broader. So for me, when I think about even simple things, industry lines are blurring. I mean, really seriously. I mean, you have Google in health and other companies trying to dabble IBM Health, IBM Watson, etc. So what does that mean? In fact, I talked to a computer technologist at MIT who was able to model a DNA behavior on a chemical compound in 4 hours. And his basic profession is he's an astrophysicist on computer models. He was able to talk about planetary behaviors and chemical reaction remotely. So for me, nationalism, right? The reason I say nationalism or geopolitics is because racial inequality doesn't mean the same thing in different parts of the world. I mean, I have employees in Singapore telling me Asians discriminate against Asians. So Black Lives Matter is irrelevant to them. So I take a little bit of a different view of this from a global standpoint. So that existed. So everybody is under this data digital race, but what is that relevant to your company, first into your industry, your company, and how are you going to differentiate it, right? So in my world, we think about how you treat people, new diseases, rare diseases, etc. So the way I think about this is the breadth of risks and the differentiation of risks and opportunities was highly varied, and companies needed to be thoughtful. And it puts leaders in a place where they have to play differently compared to the past. It has to be very different. And COVID, the entry of COVID truly, for the way I think about it, has accelerated some of these things and added different dimensions. So I'll give an example. I've shamelessly stolen this from my friend Adam Grant, right? He talks about often, people have experienced chronic crisis, like a financial market downturn, or acute crisis like the 9/11 in the US or something. But this is a time where you have the confluence of both acute and chronic crisis. So it calls for things that's highly different. And what I'm truly worried about is the relationship credits people have, and we're cashing them on them. New employees coming on board, not being able to build relationship credits. And how do you really differentiate and maintain that pace in an already accelerated world is an interesting dimension to say. Otherwise, I can go on and on. I'll stop and I'll let Henri and David share their perspectives.
No, we'd rather hear from you. Keep going. No, no, that's actually quite amazing, because you're handling things you got to handle now, like that are critical, and it takes different types of leadership, to do that. And you mentioned one thing about relationship credit. One thing I've heard, so first of all, I'm talking a lot to the Middle East these days, and they're semi-joking around saying, wouldn't it be funny if the Middle East shows the rest of the world what peace looks like, which would be ironic. And secondly, they're saying, if we have peace, the only thing that's going to happen is us Israelis are going to fight with each other and the Arabs are going to fight with each other. So it doesn't really matter. But the bringing people on with respect to diversity and inclusion and relationship credit, I've had a lot of conversations recently about, if you're bringing people on, you've got to bring them in to win. Put them in a position to win. Don't put them in a space where, they're like a woman of color. It's really hard. Really support them, introduce them, give them some of that relationship credit, give them a champion to work with them, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things going on in that respect. I find right now too. Let's go. I'll come back to David in a second, but Henri, with respect to boards, let's talk with respect to boards. What's the future?
That's interesting. So some of the boards we're involved in, or even some that I chair myself personally, we're looking at our labor costs and determining, in respect to other expenses connected to that, do we actually need these office buildings? Do we need to still lease these 3 floors in a new building called Commercial Bay in Auckland at XYZ? And if we wipe that out and exit those leases, or sublet them to other organizations and we can't get out of them, are we better off? And even looking at the office premises, are they fit for purpose in a post-pandemic world? And also, our business models need to adapt to the next generation of people, millennials and even the Zs and the like, who want to have ownership a lot earlier in their lives and actually be their own bosses and freelance or contract or startups and the like, but part of a global entity. So in conclusion, we decided that for some of the businesses, we are going to exit some of our leases and allow people to work from home. We're going to actually give them some benefits from that, allowing them to expense a little bit where they can, and we're still working through those numbers. The second point here is, as we recruit new employees in the organization, we're going to sort of ask, how long do you want to stay here? And if you don't stay here, can potentially look to invest in you, depending what you come up with, as part of an ecosystem of businesses to support us, whether it's technology we may want to license, whether we want to have ownership in that. So a good example of that is recently we've designed a new platform for trading within, I have to be vague here, within agriculture globally. And it's quite innovative. And we had pushback from one of the execs to have ownership. But what we've done is we've created virtual shares, an employee share ownership scheme called ESOP for them to buy into over time, and they have to earn it as opposed to give it to them. And thus we are creating other smaller microcosm of businesses around the world. That's it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You mentioned real estate. I've had clients that have talked about, I had one client who did it. They built a daycare center, and they're looking to build a daycare center in some of the real estate, the offices that they're not going to be using now, to help employees come to work and have all that. Some of them have even talked about building gardens, indoor growing, which comes into community, bringing the employees together to grow and bring their kids in and all sorts of stuff. So it's interesting. We could be creative humans, what people can think about to make things happen. In corporate world, David, what do you think it looks like with respect to, Stephen, some of the examples that you've heard here?
Yeah. Well, so first, the future of work for all of us is shaped by global trends and mega trends, right, that are really shaping the future of work. So we speak about, of course, automation and digitalization, robotics, artificial intelligence. These are the big trends informing what the future of work is. I think what the common element is that complexity. Is a faster and faster, more complex and more complex world in which we need to make decisions and being comfortable to make decisions. And for that, I think it's about mental strength and resilience. And we speak about mental health a lot because of the negative impact it has on our community and our employees. In New Zealand, we have one of the worst state of mental health in the world. So there is a lot of investments and conversations that we bring to the surface, that we bring to the boardroom, that we bring into our employees' conversations to address it. Because we know that mental health fundamentally impact the country, the communities, and our performance, right? So I think topics like resilience and mental health. And I tell you what, Mark, if you want to talk about the future of work, go and see schools, primary schools today, in New Zealand, for example, where I went yesterday, where kids themselves speak about their own mental health. We never did that 30 years ago. So society has moved for the better. So we speak about artificial intelligence on one level, and then we speak about mental health on another level. These are the big trends that I think are informing the future of tomorrow.
Yeah, that's...
I close with one thing. People don't really care how much we, the leaders, know. They want to know how much we care. And that's a fundamental concept of the future of work and the future of leadership. So we have a huge opportunity to redefine the way we work today. And I find that particularly exciting.
I didn't even have to pay him to say the leaders who care. He just said it. That was a brilliant. But that's what I keep hearing, you know, all over the place. And one of the analogies I always give, and I'm sure Henri and I have talked about it, is the coach that supports his player on a sports team, no matter what, that player will do everything for that coach, no matter what. Exactly. And it's all the same. It could be a parent, it could be a boss, it could be anything. Have any of you seen the documentary, The Corporation, by any chance?
Mm-hmm. No.
It's on YouTube. It's a little long. It's almost 2 hours. Corporations the first one started as a public trust entity. They weren't allowed to acquire companies. It had to benefit the community. And then they show how everything started happening after that with respect to policy, greed, discrimination, etc., and non-accountability for action. Corporations. Fascinating read, but I'd love to get your opinions, you know, on the corporation in itself, as it relates to boards, as it relates to, you know, part-time workers, full-time workers, et cetera, but how do you think that may change? Our company in itself is a corporation, but we're a public benefit corporation.
Can I comment? Can I jump on that one and comment?
Well, I guess so. Yeah. Go for it.
So we speak about the move from shareholders capitalism to stakeholders capitalism, right? We speak about enlightened capitalism or conscious capitalism. The World Economic Forum came up with a statement that the purpose of a corporation is to benefit all its stakeholders. So I think we start to see that message percolating in the business world at a pace that we've not seen before. I'm going to just one iota on that is that we also saw that happened in the early 2000s. There was a moment of attempting to enlighten capitalism, and the GFC really killed it. So I am optimistic, but I'm also realistic that that crisis could threaten that new view that businesses have a real vested interest in taking into consideration more than financial performance. So I am a believer. We can talk about ESG funds moving into the share of ESG money. So there's lots of dimensions and elements that make us believe that this is here to stay. But we also need to be conscious as leaders that we keep on bringing our focus to these dimensions of purpose and values for enlightened organizations.
It's interesting, Padma, Jack Ma, when he took Alibaba public here, he spoke and he said that we have it all wrong. It's not the shareholders first, it's the employees first, and then it gets all the way up to the shareholders. So what's your view on that?
So it's the word organization, right, has a living thing. For me, an organization is a sum of all the organisms within an organization. And it's all the capabilities that are created by the people, whether it's process, product, right, channel, go-to-market, right, channel capability, whatever the case may be. So it's a collective sum of the organism, and it has its own life cycle. It goes through the cycle of its own, and then it goes through a societal cycle, as David was talking about. And the societal cycle and the organization cycle and the individual perspectives constantly will be linked. I mean, when I think of CEOs 20 years ago to be talking about bottom line and top line growth, to today having, stakeholder management. I mean, I sit with investors or even with proxy advisors having to talk to them about, various metrics and how are we performing, as a company, where are we driving? And it's not just driven by proxy advisors and investors. It's actually demanded by your employees also. They want to be a part of an organization that's relatable to them in a particular way. And you see that pressure even being placed on boards. I'm sure Ari can talk a lot more about it. So boards, the way they need to manage the management, also I see that change happening in the recent times. So.
Yeah, and I think, talent won't come to a company, and it's getting more and more. They won't come unless you do care, unless you do have purpose, as Emily said, and for real, and you can prove it, not just saying, oh, we have an open door policy, no problem.
Yeah, we're very clear about three major pillars for us: patient, people, and planet, and how each one helps, and correlates with the other to relate to the broader good.
And the more you care, the better you actually do. Basically has been shown time and time again. Just look at you guys. So Emily, thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with what both Padma and David said. I think that for a lot of leaders, it's actually very unclear how to get there. I'm often struck by how many leaders, they say these sort of broad sweeping statements, and yet there is absolutely no roadmap that really resonates with them. And so, for instance, companies said, oh, we're getting some really strange decisions, so we need to have more people involved in decision making. And now you've got this absolute mess where, between 5 and 20 people are involved in decisions, and they're from across the entire organization, often in warring positions. And so the easiest decision to make is to do nothing, or if there is a decision, it's completely commodified and the lowest common denominator kind of stuff. You see leaders saying, okay, well, we know that the fourth industrial revolution is coming, and yet the information about the fourth industrial revolution is the end state, not the roadmap how to get there. And so you see leaders sort of saying, oh yes, we must be innovative, and yet most of them couldn't give you a description of what they mean. And so they'll find someone within the organization who's, wanting to be disruptive and who wants a bit of a Star Trek job and say, go innovate. And then those folks kind of go, oh, well, what do I do? And they spend, a couple of years going around in circles deciding that they're going to prioritize what the company's problems are or whatever, and not doing anything about it. And then when they've done nothing, they get disbanded. 60% of those groups are getting disbanded. So we see all of these sort of strange things happening as companies are sort of going halfway because they don't know what to do, and they're creating more problems than they actually started. You know, they've decided to get into data, and now they've got this spaghetti ball of data that they still don't have any metadata that gives them any better ability to make decisions, but they've put this huge onerous burden on people to actually be creating that data that's fairly useless. And so, you know, I think that there are some real lessons, especially from the companies that are really achieving a lot, you know, the Amazons and the Googles of the world, that say, okay, if you go the full way and here's the roadmap, you can actually get these things done and all the things that Padma and David have been talking about. But there needs to be that clarity first.
Yeah, it sounds like in some ways what Padma said about reacting, but in a different way. They're just reacting because maybe they're feeling they're falling behind and they don't know what to do. And a lot of them are just, we find anyways, just, and it relates to diversity and inclusion big time, just saying versus doing, or saying and then doing the wrong thing, and it's even worse, to your point. It almost reminds me of way back when they used to change their whole enterprise system, and then someone as a consultant had to come in to fix it after they changed their own enterprise system and everything, and cost them a fortune. So Henri, add to that.
I'll focus on the role of the board, and I think there's a lot of challenges there across the world. And I'll think of just the Anglo-Saxon markets initially. A lot of old school. They look at governance as compliance, and they actually don't recognize it's really about strategy, and it is about stakeholder engagement and stakeholder capitalism. The world has changed. It's not only solely about profit maximization. I think you have a lot of directors who still stand in the way from all diversity, gender, age, et cetera, still block things because they have a way of doing things. And they're actually not listening with their eyes and ears in the boardroom. Second, they don't know when it's time to go. And also add to the board the right skill sets around innovation, but really innovation or sustainability, what it means. So what you see a lot now, a lot of boards are still trying to catch up what actually technology is and visiting Silicon Valley when they could and try to learn something. Well, it's too late. If you're trying to do that, then you actually should never have been appointed to the board in the first place. And you're about being a collegiate team and supporting each other, but also ensuring you don't hear one voice, but multiple voices. And the role of the chair is critical. The last comment I'd make around the current governance framework, it will change. I think as you look at what Netflix have done with their own governance model about real-time sharing of information, the role of a director is part-time, but full-time in thinking and watching and observing. And it's about supporting a management team on their quest to grow the business, to actually think about the values and making sure that people are taken care of. And as a result, customers will want to do business with that organization. And customers are smarter now. With social media, within seconds, you can destroy a brand. And within minutes, you can grow a brand by making the right statement. And Patagonia was a classic example. Please stop buying our fleeces. We'll repair them for free. And next thing, sales doubled because, well, that's a great company. You're going to stand by your product. I'm going to buy another one now. Well, that's a challenge in itself about marketing, but and consumerism and the circular economy. And that's another video, I'm sure. But to close is, we want boards to become self-aware and actually think about what skills we need around the table and what personalities we need around the table that have a passion for the organization, a passion for the business, and care about the future of the planet. That's my soapbox.
Brilliant. You know, I stole culture ad from another client. I had a diversity, the word culture ad, and we talk about right fit culture ad when we recruit for boards or companies, because right fit is misinterpreted as you got to fit in exactly like what's there. And that's not the right fit, actually. It should be culture ad. And one of the biggest things I get from both sides, CEOs saying, I wish my board would bring me strategy, bring me vision that I don't have time all the time to think about. To your point, Henri, about thinking all the time. And then I'll have board members that'll say, I wish the CEO would listen to us. and some will say, I can do a better job, but that's another conversation. If trying to sabotage the CEO. So just to complete, and this is, I really appreciate you. I mean, you guys are all leaders who care. And I appreciate you being here. And if you could end by saying one or two things that you're most grateful for now, I think that'd be cool to hear. So we'll go back to the original starting lineup. Emily.
I'm really grateful that when we give people within organizations the ability to do something big and then the tool sets to go do it, they shine like you wouldn't believe. They step up to the plate and give you more than you ever expected. And so I couldn't be more happy than what can be unlocked in people if we trust them and give them what they need.
That's great. Plus, you're grateful for dinner with your parents.
Yes, I am.
I hope they're good cooks, by the way, Emily. They cook well? Or are you cooking?
Oh, my mother is unbelievably good, and my husband also. So we're pretty lucky.
Okay, we're inviting ourselves all over there soon, by the way.
Yeah, that's the next trip.
Looking forward to it.
All over to Emily's parents' place. Well, Henri, since you butted in, go for it.
I'm grateful for good food. No, on a serious note, I'm grateful for being alive and witnessing some dramatic changes on the planet that we live in. That actually, I do believe in humanity, and it's not to be a bit of a cliche, but I watched some of the great things that happen, everything from David Attenborough's own memoirs as he's alive about his 90-year plus journey, to we actually do care about each other. And I think leaders who care are the ones that will survive. Leaders who don't care will put them out to pasture and they can go do something else.
And leaders who care but don't know how, we can all help them at the same time.
Well, sorry, I should say you can't help them. I was being a bit impatient there. But you're right.
All right, we'll save the best for last, maybe, which means David, we're going with you first.
Whoa. Okay. Well, I'm just grateful to work with a CEO and a board who care, because they do in our organization. And I'm grateful to have the mandate and the permission to take sustainability to places that have never been done before for mass retail of our size. So I'm really grateful for that. And then to close, I'm really grateful to see these kids and these young people, millennials generation, to take the street for climate action and sort of more conscious and more ethical choices from business. I love that. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're going to see an interview coming up soon with two young girls out of college that have created a whole podcast and movement on engaging with each other, everybody engaging with each other, and no matter what your views are, etc. A little bit like Nonflict, but even more so. Padma.
So I'll talk professionally and then personally. So professionally, I'm very grateful for learnings that I have every day. And now I'm even more grateful that I look at all the learnings that I've had or that I have now with a completely different lens in the world that we journey. And I cannot even fathom that I would think that way. I can talk technically about hierarchical organizations going away, fishnet-like structures, and as Emily was talking about, how do you really make, decisions that are, high-impact decisions. But those all were technical things. But and then because you're a caring leader, you want it to be driven in a caring manner, but it's inexplicable for me. It's taken me to a very different dimension as a person, a professional and a leader. So I'm immensely grateful for that opportunity amongst all this difficult, uncertain, and painful times. On a personal level, Mark knows me. I am extremely grateful to my parents. They're my first and best friends. They've shaped me in everything that I am, and everything that I've not learned and I have to grow is because I don't listen to them. And I am grateful that I still think about everything that they've taught me or the tough moments that I've had, and that I'm able to continue to learn from that. Thank you.
That's awesome. How can I not be grateful for you guys? And I'm grateful for actually having the opportunity to engage with you and people like you that actually do care and are realizing that that's what it's all about. That is what it's all about. So thanks so much to everybody, and keep being leaders who care.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for bringing us together, and thank you, everyone.
That's a good one.
I look forward to our reunion. Nice to meet you, Padma and Emily. Hi, David.
Ditto.
Guys, thank you.